Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. In case you don't know, I'm nervous, wondering why I did this. But I would like to start with this reading. It's easy ways to raise your vibration. One is repeat positive affirmations to yourself daily. Mine on the drive over was slow down, thank you, slow down. That's the one for today. 2, start to appreciate the present moment more. 3, eat high vibrational foods like fruits and herbs. 4, hydrate and flush out toxins with distilled water. 5, meditate every day and devote yourself to a daily practice. 6, movement increases vibration. Dance, stretch, flow, hike. 7, listen to healing frequencies. 528 hertz, 432 hertz, etc. 8, devote time to hobbies that make you genuinely happy. 9, spend time in nature and express gratitude to the earth. 10, consume less and give more. Anyway, I don't know where that came from, but I thought it was nice. The title of this workshop is Spiritual Empowerment for Unity. So I would like your help in finding out where our separations lie. And what is it that separates us? How did we get so divided? You know, it's just, for me, I see, there's a lot of them. Like, most of us I see here in the recovery process. And in the recovery process, it started back in 1953 when NA broke away from AA and started their own fellowship. And a lot of that was because of the intolerance of the AA crowd against the addict's message. And there's a part in the book here, it's on page 60, where it says, the very practical approach to his problem, the absence of intolerance of any kind, the informality, the genuine democracy, the uncanny understanding which these people had was irresistible. And somehow we lost that. You know, it's like if I go to an NA meeting and say recovered, it's not acceptable. It's not in their book. They don't even know about recovered. So, but anyway, to me, it's about labeling too. The labels define, like I am an alcoholic. Well, when I say I'm an alcoholic, what I'm basically saying is that I'm a victim to alcohol. And I don't know where, it's not in our book, you know. And the nearest I could find where it originated was in the early 50s. I was listening to a lady speak from Texas. And she was speaking and she qualified as I am an alcoholic and said that's the way we define ourselves down in Texas. And there was also a movie that was I Am an Alcoholic was filmed. But yeah, so the intention of this group, which I really appreciate you showing up for, is that I would like to get a group of people that want to be more spiritually fit than programmed. You know, like I think this is the greatest spiritual movement around. And I'm having a hard time adjusting or fitting in anymore in the regular 12-step program. I go when I feel out of place. You know, I don't feel like I can talk anymore because I don't believe in powerless. I believe this is the most empowering spiritual movement of the 20th century. You know, the book tells me lack of power is my dilemma. So if lack of power is a dilemma, what's the solution? The solution is to gain power. So, how many of you read this book? Wow, thank you. what I'm talking about is going to be pretty much the same thing in this book, between these two books. This is by far my favorite book. And I have read countless books over the years. I don't know how many or what, but it's just like when I put these two together, I really have peace. I find that freedom. And that's, to me, it's just like when I wrote the book, I didn't really give direction on how I got there. How did you get to that freedom, that peace, and that understanding? You know, and for me, the process was in step 10 when it says we move into the world of the Spirit. This is not an overnight matter. We should continue to study it for a lifetime. And then I don't know about you guys, I go to lots of meetings, and I never hear us talk about the world of the Spirit. And I never really got any peace or anything until I created what I believe is my world of the Spirit. And then when I created that, it was real easy to live there. Most of the time I can spend in that world of the Spirit because I know what it is. You know, I didn't have any idea like anyone else, because we did a workshop on this before. You know, for me, it's like I had to define what isn't in the world of the Spirit. And what isn't there is jealousy, there's no resentment, there's no fear, there's no worry, there's no insecurity, there's no lack. To me, those are all third-dimensional frequencies. So when I created the world of the Spirit, I got to eliminate those things. I don't want to live in these vibrations anymore. I want to live at peace. I want to live at joy. I want to live at free. And in order to do that, I have to focus on being in the realm of the Spirit, the world of the Spirit, like the book talks about. But it's hard to be there because I don't know a whole lot of people I can talk to about it. You know? It's, and I know that to me is like, it's the first place I really found peace. You know, I could actually relax. Take a deep breath and shoulders drop, and it's like, you get this big grin. And I love the smile. And it just, yeah, so I would like to have us focus on going there and reacting or responding from there more so than from, I have a disease, I'm sick. You know, it's just, I don't have a disease. You know, I had cancer. I watched my great-grandson go through it. But it's, to me, it's like, most of you know me, you know. To me, it's God. Life's happening for me. It doesn't happen to us. It's everything. I don't care what it is. You know, I felt guilty when I watched my great-grandson go through this cancer thing because in the back of my mind, there's no mistakes in God's world. So even with this little guy with cancer, I felt bad because I didn't feel bad. It's like, no. You know, this little guy at 4 years old has brought more light into this universe in 4 years through the people that follow him. So many people followed him on Facebook, you know, and there was so much love and prayers and light. And God, it's just in 4 years he's done this, you know. He wakes up in that realm of the Spirit I spend all day trying to get back to. It's like I was saying the other day, it's like I watch him come out of this, whether it's the chemo or whether it's the radiation, and he comes out and he's got this big old grin on his face, and he's just as happy as can be. And I drive down the road and get pissed at you because of the blinker. You know, I mean, it's where does this thinking come from? So that's part of what I wanted to create in this workshop. I wanted to create a more of a unity, more of us that think alike, get along, and work more together on being spiritually fit than diseased. You know, I can remember in 1976 when the American Medical Association decided that alcoholism was going to be a disease. And basically it was so they could prescribe medication for it, and then they could create all these recovery programs. And I remember in the old timers at that time, were all bummed out because they said the last thing an alcoholic needs is an excuse. Now he has an excuse to why he's sick. Instead of looking at his pathetic behavior, he can blame this disease, you know. And I think that's one reason when the doctor and I believe the book was divinely inspired, and they used the word illness, and they put the word recovered in there so we would get past it and move on. And those are the power words. Recovered is a very powerful word. And yet I don't hear us use it in the meetings, you know. I'm an alcoholic. Well, if I'm out in public and I say I'm an alcoholic, what do you think an alcoholic does? Well, they drink. Well, how about a recovered alcoholic? What do? Well, they don't drink. So I can't understand why recovered isn't more in our fellowship and in this spiritual movement. You know, and to me, we're responsible for that. When I look around this room, I mean, there's nobody I see in here under 10 years or so, hardly. And yet, I don't hear that word enough, you know. And it's our responsibility to create this in our meetings. God, I didn't come up here just a bitch, did I? Good Lord. Someone else want to take over? I had wrote some stuff here. I should probably get to that. I wasn't bitching there. Okay, workshop intention. Spiritual empowerment for unity is the answer to many questions that I've been asking since publishing my book. Spiritual Empowerment Through and Beyond the 12 Steps is the book. The intention of the book was try to get the general population to understand that the 12 steps were designed for the living, designed for living for the human experience and not just the alcoholic. See, that's what I believe. I believe that this spiritual movement would benefit the planet much more if it was for everyone. There have been millions of people all over the world whose lives have been drastically changed through this 12-step Design for Living process. In 1999, I was having some mental health issues. Imagine that. I was told by my therapist I needed to take a break from AA for a while after going for 30-plus years. In that time off, since I couldn't go to meetings, I would read the Alcoholics Anonymous book and actually study it. I mean, really studied it. And what I found in studying this book is what I believe to be the greatest spiritual movement of the 20th century. I've been reading book after book since Be Here Now, Ram Dass in the early 70s. There have been so many great authors and teachers over the years that I've had the privilege of learning from, and too many to name. In my time off and studying what we call the big book, it came together. It all came together. Everyone that I had read from, God, there was a good one Kelly gave me, and I wrote about it in the book. It's Christine Nowley. She wrote Sacred Choices, you know, and that was the one that got me to question, what are the limiting beliefs of your tribe? And that's when I really started looking at what limiting beliefs do we have in the recovery process. And the first one that stood out was I am an alcoholic. I am powerless. I mean, those are how we get here. You know, powerless isn't where we're supposed to hang out. But I sit in meetings and I listen to people with multiple years talk about how powerless they are. And I wonder what happened with, how do you have a spiritual awakening and not be empowered? Especially a spiritual awakening after doing all the work. It's, anyway, back to bitching again. I better. All right. This Design for Living was the simplest and easiest way I ever found not only to get beyond the third dimension, but to live life not only as a human being, as a spiritual being as well. And that's what I really learned when I did that, moving into the realm of the spirit in the 10th step. I understand I am a spiritual being. And the human being is such a small part of that fraction. I think I described it as being the spiritual being would be like the earth and the human beings like California. it's real limited. But when you go beyond the third dimension, and to me those dimensions are within you already. It's not like you have to go out here. You just have to go within you. And there's everything you ever need you got when you got dropped off here is the way I see it. So, do you have any questions? Well, thank you. Yes, sir.
That idea that it became a disease and the money came in for the rehabs and all that is also tied into that thing about, we don't talk about recovery, it's almost like addictions, and those two have an integration. When we started doing recovery programs, and it became a disease and insurance companies can make money and you can do that, then it's almost like there's that dovetail between we're not recovered, we still have a disease.
Right.
That idea that keeps perpetuating because it's part of the system, the money system.
Right. It promotes illness, is what it does. It promotes sickness more than wellness.
But also there's something tied in with money. I mean, it's an odd deal. When you're talking about a spiritual program, when you start introducing money into it, it's almost like a caveat, right? It's spiritual things, divine inspired, but we have this other aspect now where you can kind of buy your way into recovery.
Right.
Throw that out. It always kind of bothered me that.
Sandy.
Having had worked in the field, the recovery, you go to these rehab treatment centers, and it is all about the money, and they will keep you there for a long time, as long as they can keep getting the money, which is a sad thing to see, especially if you're working there. And I know for me, I stopped because I was getting burnt out. And I wasn't seeing people getting better. I saw them staying sick.
Yeah, well, I went through the certification program, and once I got certified, I couldn't work in the field because I can't go along with the disease idea and concept. Leah.
So, in the empowerment process, and I appreciate that so much, I look at the first step of powerlessness and what my belief of it and my interpretation was surrendering. There was a point of surrender that happened in the beginning of the process for me to start the recovery walk to that dimension. So it was a whole lot of really good ideas that I had when I showed up, but I had to surrender all the good ideas and was nil until I let go, and that was more surrender. So before I get to empowerment, there's surrender, and it's a process of more surrendering of small little things throughout the steps for me. So I'm just wondering, at what point do I stop surrendering and just take on power?
Well, for me, surrender is going from the known to the unknown. In other words, when I surrender, I'm giving up what I already know. I know if I take this chemical, what it's going to do. I know if I do this, what's going to happen. But when I start getting clean, I don't know what's going to happen if I don't have something to relieve this pressure. So to me, you go from the known to the unknown. And the freedom to me is always in the unknown. It's like we go through life and we go through these peaks and valleys. And throughout life, there's always going to be a peak and a valley. Until you, well, I don't know, I kind of like flatline now, but there is some freedom in that. But it's just like, to me, all the gifts come in the valley, because that's where the unknown is. You don't know what's going on down here. And you're there long enough to figure it out, and as you start figuring it out, you start coming out of the valley. you start getting up to another peak. And then apparently the universe thinks you need another valley. So something will happen. It may not be you, it may be someone you love, but something will happen that'll put you down in the valley. And it's what we call life. We just go up and we get those breaks, and then we realize how lucky and blessed we are to be here. And shortly thereafter, we get hit with another valley. So, and then after a while, it's like you understand, or I understand life's happening for me. So it doesn't matter what it is, I'm going to be okay with it. If it's my great-grandson's cancer, if it's a friend of mine that just passed away, I was working with someone the other day, and they were talking about their brother passing away. Well, I've been out to Iowa 3 times to say goodbye to my brother, and he won't leave. He's got COPD, he can't breathe, he can't go anywhere or do anything, but he keeps holding on. Like, man, I'd give up in a heartbeat. Brian.
It's so funny, I think this program is not only spiritual, it's serendipitous and synchronistic. Today I was talking to my sponsor, and I was going through this thing, and I said, I have a real problem. I'm kind of an AA elitist. I believe this is such a good system that I almost feel superior because I have it. And I've got to temper that. I've got to kind of have that tolerance to other people, because I hear other people talking about all these things that are complex in the spiritual world. I don't an example, but issues with some parts of I'm a Christian, I believe in the gospel of love. I don't believe in a relative love, let's say, where that person doesn't get it, so they're not make that as an example. But I think, when the idea is I'm coming here because I've always loved you and loved your message, I think that I want to be part of that spiritual community you're talking about. And I think the framework is, like Paul says, a good framework, but to get it expanded, I don't think it's limiting us. I think it's helping us catalyst to get to that fourth dimension. But I've got to be careful thinking that, it's just so empowering to me. It's given me, like you said, the power to make my life so exponentially better, and I don't see anything that's going to stop that. I'm on the same wavelength as you. Even the darkest time to me is the best time in retrospect, when I'm in them, I'm kicking and screaming, and more and more I let go, and that's the program teaching me to let go. I just want to throw that out about my pure attitude.
Thank you. Well, that's why I like that saying, the years tell you what the days never know. Because I don't know this till I'm down the road, and then I realize, wow, I've gotten to where I look and I try and learn from what happened, no matter how bad it looked in the beginning. What was the advantage of it? And I always use the example. I was in Iowa visiting my brother, and he lives next door to his daughter at the time, and they've never gotten along. I don't know where he bought a house next door. But I got tired of the arguments. I went down to Texas to see my daughter. And while I was there, a friend of mine called he was a little older than me. Anyway, he was in Scotland. And I ended up, long story short, I ended up getting to go to Amsterdam and then to Scotland. And basically, if it hadn't been for the argument back there in Iowa, it never would have happened. And there's so many instances in my life where I can follow that transaction. That's what makes it so easy for me to understand it's happening for me and not to me. Because life itself is just a gift. And then I think at the end of that, there's a bigger gift, really, but that's going to be a while yet. I was at a meeting, someone was talking about how they lived to be so old. Well, I know how I did. The good die young. So I'm going to be here probably another 10 years. Unless I learn something real quick. Maybe if I quit bitching. Oh, gosh. Oh, here it is. It's been brought to my attention that the language in the book was basically addiction recovery language. and some of it would be hard to understand by the general population, which is a drag, because that's who I really wrote the book for. And they were right, so I'm re-editing the book now, and I just had it re-edited and got some better terminology and language in it that's more acceptable to everybody. Because I didn't realize, and my editor's 30 years sober too, so we were real fine with that recovery language. But it does have its limitations. Well, what I did was I would put initials for NA, and I didn't put Narcotics Anonymous, or I would put VA, and I would, and then the editor was, when she was going through it and got to NA, it was, God, how did she word that? Yeah. No, she referred to it as my nurse's assistance training. So, yeah, I didn't, and then it was like I would name, Bill. Well, who the hell's Bill? So I didn't explain co-founder. There were just things that I thought you would all know. Everybody knows Bill, don't they? So there was quite a bit of that going on in the book. So that's been taken care of. And yeah. Okay, it says here there's a lot of things we'll cover in the workshop. What my thoughts were after the workshop was that we would get a group of people to come together weekly to discuss healthy spiritual practices that are working for them. I've also thought of book reports like we've done in other workshops. Those were a lot of fun. Would people be willing to do a book report? All right. Raise your hand if you're willing to do a book report. I like you, Tom. Yeah, we did some really good book reports. Mike did one on 4 agreements. Yeah. And then Debbie did one on 100 monkeys. It was really neat because you take your favorite book and then you bring it, you make a little report, you come in and you share it with the group for 15, 20 minutes. And then it's like we all got to read the book. So it really was a lot of fun. But that stuff after the workshop, what are we doing in the workshop? I haven't figured that out yet, but... So the main thing is to figure out how to bring more unity and then get the word recovered in the fellowship as well as get ourselves into the 4th dimension. Create our 4th dimension. Michael, you got an idea?
Well, just something to point out. You gave me your table well a while ago. You might not remember it completely. There was a time before I was born when this program was first started that people didn't even identify as alcoholics in the church. I heard it on the tape. There was a guy that got up and he was the lead speaker at a large meeting. And he simply identified his name and began to share his story. I thought that was interesting. And then in the book, what is it, page 158 or 59, Jim, and it says that we created meetings so newcomer would have a place to come bring his problems. But it was for anyone who was seeking a spiritual way of life.
Right.
It wasn't isolated. Although I know this is a recovery program, I thought that was interesting that he didn't identify as an alcoholic when he shared it.
Well, in the early days they didn't.
And it's kind of evolved. We say, the old saying, if it works, don't fix it. Well, we've been fixing it from the beginning. and then next thing you know, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable before you're allowed to share. Yeah. So So, I mean, I understand that, and that's why I say I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it says that like 33 times or more in the book that we recovered.
Well, it does. It's just, like in our area here, just in our area alone, you go to a meeting and if you don't qualify as an alcoholic, they don't want you to share. And I often wondered, where does that go in with the how? Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Where's the open-minded behind that? But then I'm back to bitching. Let me, what's that? Please again?
We love you.
Thank you.
Come on with the spirit, you know?
Well, I know in 1948, they came out with this movie called I'm an Alcoholic, and it got really popular. And a few members of Alcoholics Anonymous started to go to this movie, and I think that's where they got the idea, you know, that's an idea. Maybe we should all say I'm an alcoholic before we allow someone to come. Possibly it's around the same time that they started the first allowance party. Looking back at the history.
Hmm.
Hey, Danny, do you have any ideas of why we do that?
Nothing more than what's already been shared. I mean, it's a way to make sure that Alcoholics Anonymous is a members-only club. It's for alcoholics. It is alcoholics for alcoholics. And the reason that we want to make sure the people that are sharing are alcoholics is so that we have a common denominator. The idea of one, this is written in the big book, there's one alcoholic helping another alcoholic. That's how this works. One of the main reasons that Narcotics Anonymous stepped away is because they needed addicts working with addicts. Because I have no understanding of somebody sticking a needle in their arm. Never done it, wouldn't do it, don't have any understanding. But I have an absolute understanding of somebody that wakes up and drinks scotch for breakfast. So, you know, that's the difference between me and an addict, which I do not identify with. So I can't help them. I can help them do the steps. I can't help them identify. And that's one of the main things about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think the idea that recovered is in our fellowship. I just think that it is quiet in our fellowship. And I've always said that alcoholics, people in general, are like cats. And you can't tell cats where to go. You have to lead cats where you want them to go. Right? They'll put catnip in your pocket and walk where you want the cats to go. The cats will follow you. And I think that that's what Alcoholics Anonymous. So I always say, my name is Danny Graham. I always say my last name. That's a misnomer in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, you're not supposed to say your last name. And that I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body through the steps and principles outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because that's what I've recovered from. And I think it's that. I think that we need to lead by example. Instead of bitching, we lead, right? And that's some of the spiritual life that I've chosen to walk, right? And I remember in the 90s when we were all out at Camarillo State Hospital studying the big book in a whole new way, right? And the man that started that, our friend Mike, he always said he was recovered. And I remember sitting there going, why does he say that? Never heard that before. And I think the reason is because it's not in the Narcotics Anonymous book. And there's a lot of people that go to both fellowships. And it's just easier for people to stay recovering as opposed to recovered. It is just the simpler way to go. And the problem is not Alcoholics Anonymous. The problem is the lack of study of Alcoholics Anonymous. That we should absorb that message with a greater fervor. The book says vigorous action, right? And I don't see vigorous because people accept it. They let it happen, you know? So I think it's incumbent on us, those of us who've been sober for decades, to lead, to teach, to share in a way that I remember having a conversation with my mentor Mike, telling him, I'm not going to those damn 5:30 meetings anymore. Those are not Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, those are anything anonymous meetings. I am not hearing what I think I should be hearing in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I'm not getting anything from them. And he said, Danny, if you're not hearing what you think you should be hearing, it's because you're not talking. If I'm not talking, how would anybody know what I'm thinking? Right? I can project my thoughts on you all day long, but you're not going to hear them. So, and then, and then never to go to get. Because if I go to get, I will never receive. Never. I must always go to give. I can't give and be always silent. So I think there's a lot of stuff. And, Jim, you and I, we're on the same page. I think that Alcoholics Anonymous, I think people, I said it, I've been saying this for years. I see people with the bumper sticker, powerless. I know they've never read the big book. They've only gone to meetings. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
And I say all the time, 5% of the people in Alcoholics Anonymous have actually read the book. The rest, just what I say, read it from the podium. Jim says it says this, it must say that. If Jim's misquoting, then you're believing a misquote, a misunderstanding. And I think it's lack of study. And so I've been spending my life studying the book, like you. And the history. And I believe that the history tells us more than even the book. So to know what was happening, I got told that years ago too, in the early 90s. You must know what was happening when they wrote the book to understand why it was written that way. So study the history. And we've lost our history. Our people, there's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that do not know who Bill Wilson is. That's a shame. There's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that do not know who Bob Smith was. They don't know who Ann Smith was. And her input into those two men managing to stay sober for the first 6 months. So they don't understand that. So that's what's been lost.
Thank you. See, with me, to me, it's a spiritual movement, and to me, and that's another thing, singleness of purpose to me is to become spiritually fit. And the alcohol part, when the book tells me alcohol is but a symptom, then what it's telling me, there's more to do than alcohol. And so, alcohol being a symptom, I spent 30 years dealing with the symptom before I ever got down to the causes and conditions, because that's what we talked about, the symptom. And then we listened to these stories in and out of pathetic behavior, which we all know how to do, but it's just, I never knew I was strung out on self-loathing. I didn't know the drugs that I was really using because no one talked about them. I hated myself. I know the day I lost my soul. I can still see it today. And that's far worse than being a drunk or a drug addict. So it's just like shame and guilt. And those are the things that I drank over. Those, to me, were the real drugs. If I was emotionally fit, I wouldn't have needed an escape like alcohol or pot or whatever the hell I took, because I was not emotionally fit. And that didn't just come that came from childhood. It came from addiction, sugar. I was a liar, a thief, and a cheat, strung out on sugar in kindergarten, actually before kindergarten. So the problems are, and when I work with people, I've got to work with a lot of people over the years, and the first thing I want to know is, what were you doing? What were your parents doing when you were born? Where were you born? To me, all these things are important. because that's the energy that came into your beginning. And to me, if you don't look at that, you don't know where the real problem lies. So, but that's just my story. That's just how I've done it. You know, it's just, our problems, to me, most people I've ever worked with, alcohol was a solution more than a problem. But anytime you have a solution, if you don't continue to evolve beyond that solution, it will become the problem. And that's what I've watched in my own life, more than once in different areas. But it's always, that's why I call this thing a movement. You know, you're never going to be the same. If you stay the same, then you miss the point. I mean, you look at the universe, science tells me it's still expanding. You know, I mean, you look at each body in here, science tells me we each have 50 trillion cells in the body. And then you have this guy, Bruce Lipton, that says there's this study of epigenetics, you know, and these cells in your body are absorbing the environment. It's not nearly as hereditary as we thought it was. You get the problems from your environment. And then you look at the environment we've lived in the last few years. I mean, it couldn't get much more chaotic. It's just like I'll go down the road and I'll feel really bad, and then I'll try and look at myself, well, what am I doing wrong? And then I realize it's not me, it's the environment I'm in. But I look at myself and I blame me for it. And so I start looking at what I'm doing wrong. And I'm not. Someone just told me a book, damn it, it's another book by Anthony DeMello. And
Stop fixing yourself.
thank you, that's it. Yeah.
Fixing yourself.
Yeah, in other words, you're okay. You know, that's the thing that in the big book, I remember when it tells me the problem's been removed, it doesn't exist for you anymore, and it's like, whew. And then the very next paragraph tells you that alcohol's a subtle foe. You got to watch for, you know. I'm at that point, I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do any more work. You know, there comes a time when you've done enough. You know, it's just about being now. And it's so much, if I'm okay, there's nothing to do. So that's why step 10, I quit looking for what was wrong years ago. I've done that all my life. You know, it's like I got mad at my mother in kindergarten over getting kicked out of school and found fault with the lady for the next 40 years. And even when she wasn't doing anything wrong, I had to create something so my little resentment would stay alive. I mean, I look at some of the things I did over these 75 years, it's pathetic. But I'm still here, I'm still happy most of the time, and I'm going to be okay. And that's what we want out of this. We just want to be okay, isn't it? So I'm going to stop fixing myself. Matter of fact, I think I'll work on Tom. Yeah, he could use some help. Any other comments or?
I have one.
Thank you.
Something that came to my mind is like in meetings, we'll always hear the newcomer is the most important person in the room. And I understand that, I get that. But when I have a newcomer come up to me and say, will you sponsor me? A lot of times no comes right out of my mouth. And that's because of where I am currently in my sobriety, in my life. I am in such a spiritual path that what they are looking for, they'll find it in someone that has way less sobriety than I have. That person that still has a fire in their gut, and they want, yeah, let's do this step work, and let's, you know. So something that I do too with the women that I take on is adult children of alcoholics. I do a lot of work through that. And like you were saying, where did it start? Where did it begin? And it's amazing how many people will say, I had a wonderful childhood. Well, then what the fuck are you doing here? If your childhood was so wonderful. So let's look at that and start, in the beginning. And then we'll find where it all began. And let's work on that. But I agree with you. For many, many years, I have been going beyond just AA. I have been looking into other avenues and channels and things of that nature. And what has really helped me spiritually is all the losses that I have had. Each time I have a loss of a loved one or a friend, I am getting closer and closer and closer. So that I am not sitting there in that grief. I don't have to speak that person's name and cry. No, I smile.
My first response is always good for them. When I was in therapy and the therapist was getting me through this deal with the guy in Vietnam, he said, when you die and you go upstairs, do you know who's going to be the first one to greet you? I said, well, no, who's that? It's going to be that guy you killed. He's going to be so happy he got an early out. And I've been friends with that guy ever since. But he tormented me for 30 years. The shame and the guilt I had over, and I don't know how many times I wish he would have won the fight. Let me out of here. I mean, that's a soul wound to me. And then we tried to treat it with PTSD. Well, that's a mental wound. PTSD isn't from the heart and soul. And that's what a lot of it got damaged through the heart and soul. So there's a big difference in that type of recovery. Yes, Rex. Thank you.
I just want to say that 50 years ago, I went to my first AA meeting. It was 1972, and I was 16. I was drunk at work every day. And my boss finally told me, he said, we really like having you work here, but you got to do something about the drink. And I said, oh, okay. So I went to an AA meeting. And I stayed sober for maybe a week. I mean, I had just begun, trying to kill myself. And it went on. It would get terribly bad, and I'd go back to AA again. I tried it again, can you guys help me? And every time, I was received with love and given help and kindness. And it's been an amazing journey. But I would always get drunk again. And for years and years. And then I started putting dope in my veins. And I wound up in San Quentin. And it never got better. It always got worse. And I never really ever had somebody talk to me and then me say to myself, now that guy's got something I want. That's never happened to me. Until I heard you the other day at the meeting. And I heard Jim and he was sharing, and he was comfortable in what he was saying. And it was so day in, day out AA. I mean, it really was. And he didn't care. And I thought, God, that guy's got what I want. Because being sober was never really my primary goal. I wanted to be comfortable. I wanted to be okay inside, man. I just wanted to feel okay. And so when I heard you share what you share comfortably, I thought, now that guy's got what I want. I live in Arizona. I'm here on vacation. And, so I can't listen to the last week I'm going to be here, but, hopefully you'll do some Zoom or something. I still want to follow up with you on what you're doing and what this group does. Because it's been 50 years. I finally got 15 years sober, and my life has changed dramatically. And, I love the way things are going. I was telling some lady in a meeting in Cayman, in the meeting out loud, I said, I got to tell you, my life has gotten really amazingly good. And when I was leaving the meeting, I called on her. I said, would you like Sharon? She said, yeah, fuck you. And I thought, what the hell? Why did she say that? Fuck you. Anyway, I'll shut up. I want to follow what you guys do somehow. So maybe you're going to do Zoom or something. I don't know. I read your book. I enjoyed it. I've been through so much of the same things that you have with Richard Bach and power versus force and Krishnamurti. I lived in Ojai 35 years ago. You know, all that stuff, I just went, wow. You know, here I'm reading what I was doing 35 years ago in somebody's book. And here. Thanks for that. Thanks.
Thanks, Rex. Glad you're here. Liz.
Hi. After I read your book, the part about always looking at yourself and the bad parts and the inventory, it hit me because I've been doing some other work, and it's like, yeah, shit, I keep looking at this, I gotta keep changing or fixing, right? And it just kind of, I don't know, I've been in Al-Anon, the sister program, for the last 20-some years. That's where, after being in alcohol, sober, 13 years sober, I was not hearing what I needed to hear in AA because my folks were dying from this disease. And being in Al-Anon, and it was interesting because I'm like, how do I do both? And anyway, life has gone on, and I found myself not saying I'm an alcoholic a lot, but I knew that this was, Alcoholics Anonymous was a place where, shoot, it helped me, get sober. I put the drink away. But yeah, it's been a progression of learning how to be a human in the spiritual realm. The world of the spirit, how do you get there? How do you get there? And I guess that's the question for all of us, right? How do we all get there? The world of the spirit. But as a human, I don't think you can stay there. Because we always go back, because at least that's been my experience, I guess, it's like, those things pop up, those human feelings of fear, emotion, or whatever pop up. I think that's for being human. But I do know that world of the spirit. So anyway, venturing, I love the part about the vibration, lower frequencies and higher frequencies, and how those play a big part in how I live my life, or how I feel in my body. Because learning, feeling is probably the part of, or the reaction in my body is, how do I get comfortable and manage that? Because that's really what, for me, I think in some ways, I manage that with others, with other people, with other human spiritual beings. I think, I celebrated 39 this year, 39 years sober, and I wondered what Alcoholics Anonymous looks like, or is going to look like, in longer, I went to there's a women's meeting on Monday nights and Fridays at 5:30, and it's been a while, but there's a lot of, it's just, I don't know, is it for people that are less than 30 years, or maybe, it's not always my, I'll just say this, it was nice to see the people that I haven't seen in a long time. It was nice to see the women, and to see I'm finding that I'm not in that place of sponsoring new people. For whatever reason. Yeah. And my spiritual practices are at this center, spiritual center, you know, and the meditation and stuff, but I mean, I took a trip. I went away, and whenever I used to travel, I would look for an AA or plug in, but I didn't have to, because spirit is here. So that's, I think, what you're talking about. You know, like, I'm living in a world where everything is happening, and I'm not having to find a little place to be okay and safe, because it's inside. It's that word. Whatever, you know, the spirit. It's an interesting language, this new thing that going to really contemplate and stuff. Or try not to contemplate at all, to be honest. Because it's like, oh. And I love, you know, the unknown, I think, for me, is the place. Is the place.
Thank you, I agree. Freedom from the known. Okay, we made the hour. We have any other comments? Jeff, you okay? I want to thank you all for showing up. It's just extremely grateful to have this thing. So we'll try again next Monday, 5:30, and we can close with a prayer. Thank you. That's the prayer.